This video will explain how to find slope if you're given 2 points. So the slope of a line passing through the point, so we have two, it has x1 and y1. That just means we have 2 ordered pairs, so that's what the 1 means. And then we have a second ordered pair, so that's what the sub 2's down here tell us. So it doesn't mean to square it or anything like that, those little numbers there. Okay, so it tells us to find slope that we're going to subtract the y values, and then in the denominator we're going to subtract the x values. Well, in every math textbook, this is how they write the formula for slope, but it also works if you do y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2, which I think that's easier to memorize, that you just start with the first ordered pair and subtract the second ordered pair y instead. So yes, you need to memorize and remember this formula, but it's actually super easy if you just take a second to think about it. We learned in the part 1 video, we learned about slope, and we learned that slope can be thought of as the rise over the run. Well, when you rise, if I were to rise right now from my chair, I'm getting up. So that's my vertical movement, where that's typically that's my y-axis, that's vertical, right? So if I have a graph, here's my graph paper. This is my y-axis. So when you're finding the rise, you're finding the vertical change. And then when you're finding the run, you're going left to right, which that's the x-axis. So that's how I remember the x's are in the denominator, whereas the y's are in the numerator. Here's another little way that I remember this. If I rise from bed, or from, like, I get up in the morning, right? I'm getting up. I'm vertically changing my distance. Well, if you look at the letter y, it has the vertical. To make a y, you kind of need this vertical part to make a y. So that's how I remember that the rise goes with the y's. So in this formula here, in the numerator, we're going to subtract the y values here. So again, all that formula says, there's no squaring, there's no exponents. It just says to subtract the y values in the numerator, the top, and subtract the x values in the denominator. Okay, and just like we have, like if we had the formula for the area of a rectangle, right? Letters represent things. So usually A represents area, L is length, and then W is width. Well, same thing for slope. We have a letter that's commonly used that represents slope. So the letter M represents slope. So slope, so if I put M, that means slope. The slope is equal to the rise over the run, or what we're learning in this lesson is it could also be thought of subtracting the y values. So the change in the y's, so we're subtracting the y's over subtracting the difference of the x's. So let's go ahead and try this out. Now pretend like this graph was not there to look at. So we're going to use our formula. I'm going to use this one. You can use the other one if you'd like. And then what I do is every problem starts this way. The subtraction's going to be there no matter what. And then what I do is I label so I don't make a mistake. This is x, this is y, this is x, this is y. This is going to be my first ordered pair, and this is going to be my second ordered pair. It does not matter which one's which. So I'm going to subtract my y's. So if I put this one here and this y here, then I have to start with this x here. This x here. Now again, you could also instead have yours look like this. Now, Now all we need is basic subtraction. So 3 minus 1 is 2, and 4 minus 2 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is just 1. So we get that the slope is 1. Now if we do this problem here, we get 1 minus 3 is negative 2. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. Well, guess what? Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is still 1. You get the same thing. So this is essentially what we were doing last class, or I'm sorry, in the first video, in that if we pick 2 points, these 2 points here, if we pick 4, 3, so everyone go to your graph and go to 4, 3, there's 4, 3, and then go to 2, 1. If we pick those 2 points in the last video, if we're given a graph, instead of doing this, we could just do rise, which is 2, and then we're going to run 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we get the same thing, we're just using a different method. We're using a formula because we're not going to have a graph on all of these to do rise over run. So we use rise over run if we're graphing, if we have a graph, and if we don't have a graph, then we're going to use this formula that tells us to subtract the y's and subtract the x's. So I'm going to label, this is x, this is y. I'm going to have this one be my first ordered pair and this one be my second ordered pair. So then I just do simple subtraction here. So I'm going to subtract my y's first, it says, y's first. So I'm going to do 6 minus 4. And if I choose to put this one first, then I need to pick the 2 first. So I have 2 minus 5. So 6 minus 4 is 2, and 2 minus 5 is negative 3. So remember, we could have 0 as a slope, undefined, we could have a negative slope, and we can have a positive slope. So here we have a positive 2, and this means divide, by a negative. So a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So that means our slope is negative 2/3. So we learned in the last video that when the slope is negative, if we're thinking of a roller coaster, that means it's going down. From the left to the right, it's going down. So our line. Okay, so let's go ahead and find the slope between these 2 points. So this is x, this is y, this is x, and this is y. I'm going to have this be my first ordered pair, this be my second one. And I'm going to go ahead and use the formula for slope. So m is slope. So to find slope, we're going to subtract the y's. So 3 minus 3. And then we're going to subtract the x's. So since I started with 3 here, I need to start with 5 here. So 5 minus negative 4. So we have 3 minus 3 is 0. And then we have 5 minus negative 4, which that is positive 9. And 0 divided by 9 is 0, because 9 times 0 is 0. So we get a slope of 0. Now, if you're confused here as to whether it equals 0 or undefined, the nice thing is we learned part 1 already. So we can draw a sketch. And we could graph 5, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then up 3. And then we can get graph negative 4, 1, 2, 3, negative 4, 3, and then connect them, and you could see that that is a slope of 0, because that would be 0 fun if we're on a roller coaster that just was horizontal like that. So the slope is a horizontal line. Okay, let's try one last one here. This is x, this is y. This is going to be my first ordered pair. This is going to be my second ordered pair. And then we're going to subtract the y's. And then we're going to subtract the x's. So because this one went first, this one has to go first. So negative 3 minus 0, that's negative 3. And negative 1 minus 5, that's negative 6. So here we have a negative over a negative. So we have to think, what's a negative? Because a fraction mark means divide. What's a negative divided by a negative? So hopefully you're thinking that equals a positive. So this means that our slope is positive. And then 3/6 can be divided both by 3. It has a common factor of 3, so we'd get 1/2. So the slope is positive 1/2. So since the slope is positive, from the left to the right, it's going upward. And again, the nice thing is, if this negative over a negative thing, if you were like, what does that equal? If you weren't sure, we know that we can draw a sketch of these 2 points here. So we have a point at -1, -3. Then we have a point at 5, 0. So if we connect those points there, we could see from the left to the right, it's going upwards. Those 2 points belong to a line that's increasing. It's going upwards. So we get A.